is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Government says dozens of people killed in attack on 2 villages in central Mali. More than 300,000 flee DRC violence in 2 weeks. And Egypt rejects UN call for probe into death of former President Morsi. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, West African finance ministers are getting closer to the creation of a single currency. And in sport, South Africa's Caster Semenya clash with IAAF continues after the Court of Arbitration for Sport releases its judgment. We begin in Mali, where unidentified gunmen on motorbikes attacked 2 villages in central Mali, killing at least 41 people. Local authorities say that the attacks took place in a part of the country where ethnic reprisal attacks have surged in recent months. Only days ago, attackers raided Sabanida village, killing 35 people, including 24 children.
The past few months have seen villages in central Mali become a target of attacks. The government announced that over 40 people were killed by unknown gunmen on Monday. A week before, attackers believed to belong to Fulani ethnic group killed 35 people. And back in March, suspected Dogon militiamen killed more than 100 Fulani people in 2 villages in central Mali. While no group has claimed responsibility, clashes between ethnic Dogon and Fulani communities are common. The government is struggling to quell violence.
There are no inter-ethnic conflicts in our country, and the days to come will prove it again. Yes, there are manipulations and audacious acts in order to destabilize Mali. Yes, but we will thwart those acts.
In its recent history, our country has never seen so many victims and so much material damage stemming from inter-community violence, which is fueled by the pressure by terrorist groups and competition for access to and control over natural resources, often against the backdrops of the resurgence of old conflicts.
Security forces have since been dispatched to the location to protect the population and to track down the assailants of these attacks. Violence in the country started when rebel fighters and Tuareg militias took over the north in 2012. The militants then regrouped, tapping into ethnic rivalries to recruit new members. Chomgono, CGTN.
Well, let's now cross live to Lagos, where we have CGTN's Deji Badmus on standby for us. Deji, worrying developments in Mali, and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has condemned previous attacks. What's been the reaction on recent developments?
Well, Karen, this attack just happened on Monday, and so we're yet to get a reaction now from ECOWAS. I mean, it issued a statement over the previous attack, the attack that happened about 7 days ago, and that statement was actually issued 6 days ago, where it condemned, of course, the attack in Dogon community, where about 35 persons were killed. 95 persons now were killed. It condemned the attack and said it was going to do everything within its powers to support Mali to overcome the ethnic problem it is having to deal with. But so far we've not gotten any statement. ECOWAS as a body has not issued any statement at all. If there's going to be one, that would probably be later. But there's no question at all that this is a very worrying development, and that an attack of this nature happening just around 7 days after that attack at Dogon community, there's no question at all that it's very worrying, and that there seemed to be some kind of failure on the part of the security agencies in Mali in dealing with this crisis.
Well, so no statement on these recent attacks, but you did allude to the statement of a few days ago where the ECOWAS Commission President said that he was committed to finding urgent and lasting solutions to put an end to this fragile security in Mali. What role is ECOWAS playing in addressing this conflict?
Well, now ECOWAS has been in Mali since 2012, as was reported, as what indicated now in that report before this discussion. ECOWAS actually sent in a regional force. Of course, it's called the Africa-led International Support Mission. And that, of course, was to help stabilize Mali in the face of the coup it faced at that time and the activities of rebels in the north of the country who were threatening the sovereignty of the country at the time. And of course, these ECOWAS troops were able to join forces with the French forces in Mali to put a stop to that. Of course, you still have ECOWAS forces now in Mali, but basically they've been helping to actually check the activities of this Islamist jihadists, for instance, and rebels in the north of the country. But, you know, this is a different kettle of fish, if you ask me, these attacks. These are ethnic clashes now that you would expect that the military or the security forces now of Mali itself should be able to deal with. You would not expect that ECOWAS would want to, come into this, but of course, because it's getting out of control, ECOWAS has promised it's going to do something about it. What everybody, if you ask me, what I think ECOWAS can do is, well, not necessarily descending into the arena of conflict now, but to ensure that the proliferation of small arms and light weapons we have across that region, that something is done about it, and try to cut the funding of some of these ethnic militias, so to speak. Fact is that it's becoming easier now to have access to small arms and light weapons, and it's actually at the heart of the killings we're seeing, not just in Mali, but across the region as a whole. So it's something that ECOWAS needs to do something about, and it needs to move very fast before the situation gets out of control. People are having easy access to guns, and it's resulting in all of these deaths. And that's what we have. If you talk about Nigeria, you talk about Burkina Faso, for instance, you talk about Chad and Niger. So it's something that not just ECOWAS, but even other regional bodies, including the regional bodies in charge of the Central African region, really need to step up their effort and do something about. And I want to believe that's what ECOWAS would actually be looking at, and hoping that the Malian forces, the Malian military or security forces, would be able to deal decisively now with these ethnic clashes, deadly ethnic clashes now we're having in that country.
Okay, Deji, thank you very much for that. That was CGTN's Deji Badmus there in Lagos for us following the latest ethnic attacks in Mali. Now to the Democratic Republic of Congo. At least 161 people have been killed there in a northeastern province in the past week. Survivors who fled to safety say that people were killed and homes were set on fire. The violence is an apparent resurgence of ethnic clashes between farming and herding communities.
Survivors of the attack recall how they have lost members of their families.
I didn't come here voluntarily, but because last week on Monday around midday we saw a group of people from the hills massacre us and burn our villages. And since we had no weapons, we couldn't do anything but look at our villages burning and our people die. In fact, I myself lost a lot of members of my family and of my wife's family. One of my sister-in-law was killed with her 5 children.
The series of attacks in Ituri province have mostly targeted Hema herders, who have long been in conflict with Lendu farmers over grazing rights and political representation, although the exact identity of the assailants remains murky.
The Lendu came during the day on Monday. It was 12 o'clock. We were in the fields when we heard about it. We had started to run towards our homes, which we found had been set alight. Some people were burnt alive inside the houses. We could not take anything with us. They killed people with machetes, and we don't even know what they did with the bodies. We don't know if they even buried them. That's why we fled here.
The village attacks between the Hema herders and Lendu farmers eased, with tenuous calm taking over until this month.
Malili 1,
Malili 1, Malili 2, Malili 3, Waga 1 and Waga 2 were all burnt down, and these hooligans are still there now. The bodies are lying on the ground and they haven't even thought of burying them.
The number of 161 bodies is a number that came out of just one single common grave in Tuche. As I told you, the attacks were launched on several Hema villages, and this is aimed at destroying the social or ethnic fabric of the community.
Open conflict between Hema and Lendu from 1999 to 2007 resulted in an estimated 50,000 deaths in one of the bloodiest chapters of a civil war in eastern Congo that left millions dead from conflict, hunger and disease. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
In the meantime, the United Nations refugee body UNHCR fears the massive displacement of people in the DRC risks spreading the deadly Ebola virus further.
Since the beginning of June, more than 300,000 people have fled inter-ethnic conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Fresh violence has erupted once again in the country's Ituri province.
The situation in Ituri province has worsened since the middle of the last week, with multiple attacks involving the Hema and Lendu groups.
The northeastern province accounts for about 10% of Ebola cases in the current outbreak. It also sits on the DRC's eastern border with Uganda.
As the displacement continues at this massive scale, fears are more people will try to seek safety in Uganda.
The continuing conflict is complicating the tracing and treatment of patients at risk from Ebola. The deadly hemorrhagic virus has recently spread to Uganda, with 2 confirmed deaths. Ugandan authorities are scaling up emergency response at the border. Disease surveillance is conducted not only at entry points, but also in the communities and at health facilities. Uganda has vaccinated many of its frontline health workers. It has also approved the use of 3 experimental treatments.
The mobility of the population in North Kivu and in Ituri is a risk factor. So every time you have people moving in high numbers, it's more complicated to do the work on follow-ups, contact tracing, follow-up on people who are supposed basically to be observed for on a daily basis for 21 days.
Although the WHO has not declared the current Ebola outbreak an international emergency, countries neighbouring the DRC are set to remain on high alert. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Emmanuel Ainabayona, Senior Public Relations Officer with Uganda's Ministry of Health. Thank you very much for joining us. Uganda has already scaled up its emergency response at the border with the DRC, but we also know that some of the people fleeing into Uganda are using other channels, some of which may not be manned. How is Uganda dealing with this?
Thank you very much for having me. Uganda has been in a preparedness mode for about 10 months. And ever since we registered a confirmed case on June 11th, we have intensified and switched to the response mode. But for 5 days now, we have not registered any confirmed case of Ebola. And this brings total confirmed case to 3. And this means the first 5-year-old index case that died and was a member of the 6-member group family that entered through an unmanned border point. Since this and also declaration of this outbreak by our health minister, Uganda has had a meeting with the counterparts of the Ministry of Health on the Congo side, and we agreed to ensure that all the official and unofficial crossing points or points of entry are manned with screening facilities, and that has been done.
Well, it's good news that the number of reported cases has not gone up from the 3 that you mentioned, but given the porous nature of the border between these two countries, does Uganda, would you say, does it have sufficient resources to ensure that correct screening is done?
The Ugandan government are working together with its partners and the World Health Organization are in the process of mobilizing resources, and resources are coming in. We cannot say that we have enough resources at the moment, but at the moment we have what it takes to ensure that all persons that are coming into the country through all the official and unofficial crossing points are screened. And we are also conducting what they call ring vaccination of the now we have about 93 contacts to the index confirmed case, the 5-year-old boy, and they are receiving vaccination. So far we have had a total number of about 275 contacts and also non-vaccinated health workers who have received vaccination. And this takes, we will need vaccines, enough vaccines. WHO has already given us about 3,000 doses to conduct this exercise. So as we move on with our response, we hope to mobilize more resources.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That was Emmanuel Ainabiona there, Senior Public Relations Officer with Uganda's Ministry of Health. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including Egypt rejects UN call for probe into death of former President Morsi. And UN chief urges greater solidarity as worldwide refugees hit record high.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Kenya, 4 suspects accused of planning the Garissa University terror attack will learn their fate on Wednesday. The Garissa University attack killed 148 people. Students, university employees and police officers were among those who died. The accused have been charged with 156 counts, including committing a terrorist act and being members of a terrorist group. They have all denied the charges. Well, for more on that expected ruling, we are now joined on the line by CGTN Daniel Arap-Moy, who is on standby at the courts in Nairobi for us. Daniel, can you give us an update on the latest on that ruling?
Well, thank you very much, Karen. We're here at Milimani, and we are waiting for the final judgment for the 4 suspects that are accused of terrorism here in Nairobi. And, this case has actually dragged on for a very long time. The judgment was supposed to be delivered apparently yesterday, but it was postponed twice in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon it was postponed as well. And it was supposed to have taken place today at 10 a.m. But we've been waiting for the last 3 hours. We are not sure really what is causing this delay. But the court is fully packed to capacity. The relatives of the accused are here. We have several university students who are waiting to hear this judgment, and the defense bench is also full, and all these people are here eagerly awaiting for the final judgment that is expected to be delivered today. So we are not sure whether it will be today or it will be postponed again, but we wait for the final judgment.
And Daniel, the outcome of this trial, as you say, is eagerly awaited in Kenya. Can you give us a bit of background and tell us a bit more about why the case has dragged on for so long? As you say, there's been a delay even this morning.
Well, of course, as we all know, that this attack happened in Garissa in 2015, where the attack, where the terrorists staged the attack that killed over 148 university students, mainly, of course, including some police officers and staff of the university as well. And just because of the nature of this case being a terrorist case, it is very difficult for the state to produce evidence beyond reasonable doubt. So it's taken this long for the state to gather all the evidence. And of course, we all do know that this is a very sensitive case, and there couldn't have been any way for the state to abuse this evidence just within a few weeks or a few months. So it's taken 4 years for this judgment to be made. So we hope that by now the state has abused enough evidence that can implicate these people and either send them to jail or not send them to jail. So we still don't know. But I think that's the major reason why this case has dragged on for a long time. It is a very sensitive case. It's a terrorism in nature, so there must be enough evidence to pin the suspect before a final judgment can be made.
Okay, that was CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy there. Thank you for that. Awaiting the sentence at the Nairobi court on the attack at Garissa University. In Uganda, it's now been close to a decade since the 2010 bombings in the capital Kampala that killed 74 people and left scores injured. The attacks targeted crowds of football fans as they watched the World Cup. 9 years on, the trauma of that event is still being felt. CG10's correspondent Leonis Nyangi met one survivor still struggling to move on.
Junior Semujo will never forget where he was on 11th July 2010. The scar on his head, a constant reminder.
I can tell you that I passed away in short notes. I passed away for some good time, and at the end of it all, I managed to come back after 15 hours in a mortuary.
Junior suffered horrific wounds in the bomb blast that killed over 70 people as they watched the Football World Cup finals that summer. It would be months in hospital, relying on a wheelchair and crutches before he could walk again.
The situation I went through and my coming back, I got encouraged, and I got so much encouragement from where I had visited. And having faith in God and believing in myself.
6 years ago, Junior was able to return to work. Junior has not fully healed from the scars of that fateful day 9 years ago, but he still has every reason to live, and it's the company of friends at his workplace that have also kept him going. Here, Junior can escape those dark days. Jime Sechiranda is one of his close friends.
With what happened to him, he could have been depressed, but he is strong. We have also been there for him and other people too. There is a lot to learn from him.
Traumatic events such as these experienced by Junior can have a lasting effect. Psychologist Paul Nyanda says being around family and close friends can help heal the physical and emotional scars.
If you have people who understand, people who love you, reconnecting with others is very, very important. And especially also doing something When you do something, you keep your mind away from all these intrusive memories.
Junior can now afford to smile about his future as he continues to try and put his past behind him. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Turning to Egypt now, the government has rejected the United Nations call for an independent investigation into the death of former President Mohamed Morsi. The country's foreign minister said the request was politicized. The request by the UN and other aid groups came after Morsi collapsed and died during a court appearance. Egyptian authorities stated the cause of death to be a heart attack. In Turkey, thousands of people took to the streets to mourn Morsi. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan took part in a symbolic funeral for the former Egyptian president. He also expressed his doubts that Morsi died of natural causes. A symbolic funeral for Morsi was also held in Pakistan.
Mohamed
Morsi marched to God. It makes one think if this is a normal march or if there is another situation. Personally, I do not believe that this is a normal death.
As the world prepares to mark World Refugee Day on Thursday, the United Nations Refugee Agency says a record 71 million people have been displaced worldwide from war, persecution and violence. This is an increase of more than 2 million from last year, an overall total that would amount to the world's 20th most populous country. UNHCR High Commissioner Filippo Grandi has cautioned against depicting migrants and refugees as threats to jobs and security in host countries.
This movement of people is due to many reasons. It is what we would call a mixed flow. There's no doubt about that. Some people are looking for better economic opportunities, and others, however, and I was there, as you know, you remember, others are there, are fleeing because of the horrifying violence that is perpetrated against them.
Well, Somalia is one of the countries that has contributed a big refugee population following decades of conflict. Many have lived in Kenya and Yemen. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo caught up with one returnee who has made it his personal mission to help in the rebuilding of his nation.
28-year-old Ali Hussein Sahel is taking photos at Lida Beach in Mogadishu, one of his favorite hangout spots in the city. Sahel has been living in Somalia now for close to 2 years, having spent 26 years of his life living in Dadaab, one of the biggest refugee camps in the world. Sahel's family fled from the Gedo region just as a deadly civil war engulfed much of the country. He recalls his early days in the camp and how challenging it was for him and many other children.
Growing up as a child refugee, I actually did not get the privilege to enjoy as many resources or maybe as many privileges as other kids have. We had the opportunity to go to school freely, but that was not as easy as it is. I remember when I was enrolled in primary school, our classes had no desks. We were sitting on the floor, placing our books on the cement.
Sahel says living conditions in the camp was tough, having to forego meals on most occasions. Meanwhile, no one is allowed to leave the camp by Kenyan authorities.
I took my primary education there. I also went to secondary in that school. All of that without ever visiting anywhere outside the camp. I have actually got the first opportunity to go outside the camp when I was given a scholarship to study in a college.
It's that breakthrough that made Sahel pursue a journalism degree at a local university in Kenya. Since then, the 28-year-old has served in various positions, including an editor for the first ever refugee magazine. And in 2017, Sahel returned back to Somalia, a country he barely knew.
You need to take risks sometimes. We need to make tough decisions. You need to try new challenges. You need to be positive about life. You need to believe in yourself and believe in the fact that you can change your country.
However, Sahel's family still live in the Dadaab camp in northeastern Kenya as their son embarks on a crucial journey of finding his roots. Over a cup of tea, Sal tells me he's working on a documentary on the revival of the education sector and its focus on the state-owned public university, Jama'ada Omadda, that was destroyed during this deadly civil war. In recent years, thousands of former refugees have returned to Somalia from neighboring Kenya and Yemen. Many have secured job opportunities with the government and the private sector. Sahal now hopes that his former schoolmates will return back to Somalia and contribute in the rebuilding of this country in various capacities.
It doesn't matter what you are paid. It doesn't matter what you are regarded as. But what matters is rebuilding Somalia together. You know, like everyone needs to contribute on their part.
Meanwhile, as Kenyan authorities plan to close the Dadaab camp, more and more Somalis are returning back home as conditions slowly improve. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
All the business news coming up for you after the break, including West African finance ministers are edging closer to the creation of a single currency. And Kenyan lawmakers want the state to take over struggling national carrier Kenya Airways.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
West African finance ministers and central bank governors have agreed on technical issues surrounding the creation of a single currency for ECOWAS member states. The 15-member regional organization has set a target to have the single currency by next year, following a gradual approach that allows countries to join the monetary union when they meet the convergence criteria. Several French-speaking ECOWAS members already share the CFA franc and have done so since colonial times. The currency's draft report is scheduled to be reviewed by regional heads of state by the end of this month. Kenya's Parliamentary Transport Committee has recommended the nationalisation of Kenya Airways in an attempt to overturn the fortunes of the struggling national carrier. The lawmakers want the creation of an aviation holding company with 4 wholly owned subsidiaries that include the carrier itself and the nation's main airport, JKIA. The other 2 entities will be the Kenya Airports Authority and an aviation college. Kenya Airways has lost market share to regional rivals like Ethiopian Airlines and Rwandair. It's currently seeking ways to promote its base in the East African nation's capital, Nairobi, as a regional hub and a return to profitability, even if that means it being nationalised. Former executive Peter Moyo plans to launch a lawsuit against his former employer, Old Mutual, after he was fired as the CEO over an alleged conflict of interest. The suit came hours after the South African insurer said it had sacked Moyo. He's been on suspension over the past 3 weeks when allegations of conflict of interest surfaced. Moyo was suspended in late May over a disagreement as to how the company should engage with investment firm NMT Capital, which he founded. His departure comes less than a year after he was appointed as the CEO of the firm, which returned to its African roots last year with a primary listing on the JSE. Zimbabwean tobacco farmers are seeking an emergency meeting with the central bank to address the issue of foreign currency payments. Tobacco farmers feel that they aren't getting full value for their crop because they are allowed to retain only half of their sales in hard currency. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuyo has the details.
After setting a new production record last year, tobacco growers are finding the going a lot tougher this season.
Depressed prices, at least 36% lower than 2018, and a central bank decision to limit US dollar retention means the future of farmers of the golden leaf is anything but glittering. A last-minute change in rules on the eve of the selling season has seen farmers getting paid in local currency and not US dollars. They can buy back up to 50% of their proceeds at the prevailing interbank rate.
In terms of now retooling, the farmers are actually finding it very, very difficult because if you look at it, the parallel market rate is hovering around now 10. So that's what the manufacturers are actually using to price the inputs. But yet the farmers are being given their RTGS dollars at the rate of 6 at the moment. So you find there is this gap of 4, which is quite a huge gap.
There seems to be no respite for the farmers because now a dispute between international payment platform PayNet and some local financial institutions is slowing down bank transactions, meaning that even those farmers who are willing to purchase their 50% US dollar allocation are facing delays doing so.
Beleaguered tobacco growers are seeking an emergency meeting with monetary authorities.
There is an open door policy, and we actually, make sure that we inform them what's actually transpiring between farmers. So they're actually aware. That's why they put in this 50% retention. Although it's not enough, but some farmers are already accessing it.
Failure to do so could wreck the next season.
The morale is actually low, and even seedbed preparation for this coming season, I've been told in all districts, farmers are actually pondering whether they will actually do tobacco this season or not.
If they choose not to, they will deprive the country of much-needed export earnings, a prospect that could help them extract concessions from the central bank. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is well on track and is ready for a ground implementation, efforts are being seen across AU's platforms aimed at guaranteeing success. The Africa Union Commission is working closely with member states to develop land, air and maritime infrastructure to boost intra-Africa trade. CGTN's Giran Chala has the details.
It's over 1.2 billion people who will benefit from the Continental Free Trade Area, which represents a GDP of 3.4 trillion US dollars. Now, with the ratification by 24 member states, the AU is set to put the AfCFTA into operation. However, some worry that the huge infrastructure gap will jeopardize the full implementation of the free trade zone. The African Union says it is working with its member states to bridge the gap.
We are working with the relevant organizations and partners in order to ensure that our airports are updated, upgraded, the infrastructure is up to date, the safety and security measures are taken into consideration and abiding to international standards. We are pushing also through our PIDA program, the Program for Infrastructure Development on the railways and the road and also maritime transport.
The other key area the African Union says it's working on to hasten implementation of the free trade deal is the digital infrastructure across Africa.
We are leading on the continent for the continental strategy for digital transformation in all sectors, and particularly in sectors that support the free trade area. And we are working with different partners on e-commerce platforms, and these are excellent ways also to market and to show and to sell and buy our products and to promote our SMEs and young people working in that area.
Commissioner Abu Zaid also said Africa is busy engaging its IT professionals and international stakeholders in enhancing cybersecurity across the continent.
Again, to ensure all these transactions, all what's happening on the continent is happening in a safe and secure way, and that our data is protected, the transactions are protected. We are rolling out, our cybersecurity program across the continent.
In just a couple of weeks' time, the African Union Heads of State gathering will take place in Niamey, Niger. The leaders are expected to officially launch the AfCFTA operations. As much as It is an exciting moment for the African continent. Several administrative hurdles need to be cleared to ensure a smooth implementation of the trade deal. Group Data CGTN at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa.
Back to Kenya, and the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives wants to boost the manufacturing sector's GDP contribution by 15% in 2022. To reach that goal, the ministry is looking to enhance stakeholder partnerships with both the private and public sectors. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
Kenya is accelerating its efforts to grow high-quality exports. The East African nation's trade deficit rose by 1.4% from $11 billion in 2017 to $11.3 billion in 2018. Through its Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives, the country has laid down an export strategy aimed at ensuring growth and bridging the trade gap.
Pursue a country or region-specific interventions, such as Kenya's push for the realization of the African Continental Free Trade area that guarantees Kenya a market opportunity of about 1.3 billion people.
In 2018, the country's major exports included tea, horticulture, articles of apparel and clothing accessories, coffee, as well as titanium ores and concentrates. These commodities accounted for 62% of merchandise exports from the country. According to the Ministry of Trade, the leading importers of Kenya's products in 2018 were Uganda at 10.1%, Pakistan 9.7%, USA at 7.7%, the Netherlands with 7.6%, the UK at 6.6%, and the United Arab Emirates at 5.7%. The country is also targeting markets like the European Union, India, as well as the AGOA market. After aggressive promotional activities in China, Kenya managed to increase exports to the Asian powerhouse by $19.6 million.
Right now, we have a trade expo that is called First China-Africa Economic and Trade Forum that is being held in Yunnan province. That will be opening on 27th. And this is basically Africa-China Trade Expo. Africa is focused on Africa and China. And Kenya is participating in a big way. And I'll be leading the delegation that is going to this very, very important forum. And within the forum, we will be signing various MOUs, largely MOUs between Export Promotion Council and the private sector companies.
The East African powerhouse is investing in industrial parks, special economic zones, and expanding export processing zones to net more foreign exchange. Kenya also seeks to grow exports to the rest of Africa, the US, India, and China by double digits. Alexandria Majala for CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
China has granted around $10 million to Burkina Faso to subsidize the building of 100 school compounds. The new complexes are expected to be operational from the beginning of the next academic year, bringing tangible benefits to Burkina Faso and its people. Let's now take a look.
Bilateral cooperation between China and Burkina Faso is at the moment seeing sound development. In May last year, the two nations signed a joint communique to resume diplomatic ties. That has opened a new chapter of bilateral relations, and education is a top priority.
By the end of 2019, we will have eliminated about 2,500 straw-covered schools. So this is a program that will continue to operate in a sustainable manner in order to ensure that all Burkinabe children go to school with dignity and better conditions.
This project is about $10 million. I have reinforced the commitment made by the Burkinabe head of state to eradicate schools under straw hut roofs by 2020. These schools will be equipped with furniture, solar energy, and each composed of 3 classrooms. The project also includes the construction of 100 toilet blocks for teachers, as well as about 100 wells for the local people.
Burkina Faso, however, still faces many challenges. Access to education in the country has in recent years been complicated by a complex set of issues ranging from gender-based violence to economic and political dynamics. However, Burkina Faso's latest collaboration with China is expected to further boost its ongoing efforts to improve quality and better access to education.
The Sino-Burkinabe collaboration is a very beautiful collaboration. Creating 100 school compounds to eliminate straw hat classrooms shows a high level of friendship. This project solves many of the difficulties we encountered in transmitting knowledge to our students, who were exposed to the harsh sun, wind, rain, dust, and surrounding noise that prevented us from working in serenity and achieving good results.
The construction of these 100 new school complexes will comply with high standards to hopefully become operational by the end of 2020. Ramanyang, CGTN.
US President Donald Trump has announced plans for an extended meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at this year's G20 summit in Japan next week. Economic relations between the world's top two economies have reached new lows in recent months after trade talks unexpectedly fell apart in early May this year. From Washington, here's CGTN's Roe Ruttenberg.
Now, all of this is happening as the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer was on Capitol Hill speaking before the U.S. Senate Finance Committee. He's addressing a whole host of issues, but really also defending the Trump administration's position on tariffs on China, much to the chagrin of Democratic lawmakers, but also facing criticism from some Republican lawmakers, including the chair of that committee, Chuck Grassley, criticizing the president's position that trade wars are easily won. At the same time, the U.S. is looking at expanding those tariffs, what's called List 4, to cover another $300 billion worth of goods that could be subjected to 25% tax. Those items are now being reviewed here at the U.S. International Trade Commission right behind me. Those hearings, public hearings, happening now. We've heard from a lot of representatives from the business industry.
If a children's picture book, which is $16, it's hardcover, it has 4 color pages in it, $16. If that's going to increase by 25%, that's a significant change in the price. Parents will just stop buying books, so that's the concern.
For both China and the United States, the only two decision makers that can really ultimately make a deal are President Trump and President Xi.
That last woman there, the vice president of the U.S.-China Business Council, an organization that knows a lot about China-U.S. cooperation and has a lot of members that are clearly concerned. Roe Ruttenberg, CGTN in Washington.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including South Africa's jazz pianist and singer is awarded for great talent and philanthropy.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Continental, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A blind South African jazz pianist and singer is showing that the mind has no limits. Yanela Amnana's music is familiar with South African audiences. He also has a master's degree in music and has now been awarded a scholarship to complete his doctorate through Arts Research Africa, a project funded by the New York-based Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. CGTN's Julie Shear caught up with Amnana in Sophia Town, which was once the heart of the country's jazz scene.
South African jazz musician and composer Yonela Manana is striking the right chords. The talented musician was born blind, but it's never limited him. Manana has a bachelor's and master's degree from Wits University, and he also earned a doctoral scholarship from Arts Research Africa.
My master's was generally on acknowledging South African pianists as a movement, because I was studying a phenomenon. This time I want to study the aesthetics of it, the actual music, and to understand what it means to actually be a solo South African pianist. What kind of roles are we, assuming as we receive and react to the music?
South Africa has produced a rich ensemble of jazz artists, Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba among the musical greats who use their voices to fight against the dark days of apartheid, inspiring artists such as Manana over the decades.
South African music is amazing, man. People have been original, and I suppose sometimes being secluded as well kind of like worked out for us in the sense that they used the music to express what was happening in the country. And jazz itself, like I'm saying, as an agent of freedom, has been able to catapult South Africa, at least musically.
Yonela is hoping his PhD will bring greater insight into the art form.
Jazz means lots of different things. It's a feeling, it's a level of freedom as well, but it's a level also of awareness. And I like it because it gives me a sense of urgency and of agency that I can actually react and act upon, in terms of on different expressions.
Manana's talent spreads beyond concert halls and adoring audiences. He teaches music to physically disabled children in Katlehong Township in Johannesburg. He also works with choirs and community projects and is writing his name into musical history. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including South Africa's Caster Semenya clash with IAAF continues after the Court of Arbitration for Sport releases its judgment.
Africa Live.